I have 6 months to live. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. Marcus sat across from me at our old favorite cafe, the one we used to visit every Sunday morning before everything fell apart. His hands trembled as he reached for mine across the small table. "Cancer," he continued, his voice breaking. "Stage 4, pancreatic. The doctors say there's nothing they can do." I stared at him, my chest tightening. We'd been divorced for 2 years. 2 years since I discovered his affair with Jenna, his 28-year-old assistant. 2 years since I'd packed up 17 years of marriage and walked away with whatever dignity I could salvage. My name is Patricia Monroe. I'm 52 years old, a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Portland, Oregon. I've spent my career caring for sick children, watching families navigate impossible situations. But nothing in my professional experience had prepared me for this moment. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, real tears that spilled down his cheeks. "Because before I go, I need to make things right with you, Patricia. I need you to know how sorry I am for everything, for the affair, for the lies, for throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me." I pulled my hand back slowly, wrapping both arms around myself. "Marcus, I don't—" "Please," he interrupted. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm not even asking you to be there at the end. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. Jenna left me 6 months ago when the medical bills started piling up. Turns out she was only interested in the healthy, successful version of me. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent our entire marriage supporting him through 2 failed businesses and countless career changes. I'd worked double shifts to keep us afloat while he found himself. And the moment he finally achieved some success, he'd replaced me with someone younger. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. And I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish terminal illness on anyone. "I really am sorry you're going through this. Would you?" He hesitated. "Would you consider having coffee with me sometimes? Just to talk. I don't have anyone else, Patricia. My parents are gone. My brother barely speaks to me. You're all I have left." I should have said no. Every instinct told me to protect myself, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. But looking at his gaunt face, the way his shirt hung loose on his frame, I felt my resolve weakening. "I need to think about it," I finally said. "Of course." He nodded quickly. "Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know the truth." As I drove home that afternoon, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Marcus had looked genuinely ill. The weight loss was dramatic. The trembling hands, the pallor of his skin, everything pointed to someone facing a devastating diagnosis. My phone buzzed at a red light. A text from my best friend, Diana. "How was the mysterious meeting? Everything okay?" I'd told Diana about Marcus's request to meet, though I'd downplayed it as needing to discuss some final paperwork. Now I wasn't sure how to explain what had just happened. I texted back. "He says he has terminal cancer. Stage 4, 6 months. The response came immediately. "Oh my God. Patricia, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Was I okay? I didn't know. The man who'd broken my heart was dying, and somehow I felt guilty for not feeling more devastated. That evening, I sat in my small but comfortable apartment, the one I'd rented after the divorce. It wasn't much compared to the house Marcus and I had shared, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture I'd chosen myself. Every decision about paint colors and curtains had been mine alone. Diana arrived with Thai food and wine, her usual crisis management toolkit. "Tell me everything," she said, settling onto my couch. I recounted the conversation, watching Diana's expression shift from sympathy to suspicion. "6 months?" she asked. "That's very specific. Pancreatic cancer is aggressive," I explained, falling into my medical training. Stage 4 means it's metastasized. 6 months is actually optimistic for that diagnosis. And he just happens to tell you this now? Diana's eyebrows raised. After 2 years of silence, he said Jenna left him when the medical bills started. Diana snorted. Of course she did. So now he comes crawling back to his ex-wife, the nurse, right when he needs someone to take care of him. Patricia, please tell me you see the pattern here. I did see it. Of course I did. But there was a nagging voice in my head that whispered, what if he's telling the truth? What if he really is dying? "I'm not making any commitments," I said firmly. "I just told him I'd think about it." "Good." Diana squeezed my hand. "Because you've already given him 17 years. You don't owe him your grief, too." But over the next week, Marcus called 3 times. Not demanding, not pushy. Just brief messages asking how I was doing, sharing updates about his condition. His oncologist had suggested trying an experimental treatment. He was meeting with a hospice coordinator. Each message was a small weight added to the guilt accumulating in my chest. Finally, I agreed to meet him again. We met at Waterfront Park on a crisp October Saturday. Marcus sat on a bench overlooking the Willamette River, wrapped in a jacket that seemed 3 sizes too large. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down, maintaining careful distance between us. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Some days are better than others." He stared out at the water. "The treatment makes me sick, but the doctors want to try, even if it only buys me a few more months." We sat in silence for a while, watching joggers pass by and dogs chase tennis balls in the grass. "Do you remember when we used to come here?" Marcus asked softly. "Sunday mornings after brunch." I did remember. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Patricia, I know I have no right to ask you for anything," he continued, "but I'm scared. I'm really scared. And you're the only person who ever made me feel safe." Something in his voice cracked through my defenses. This wasn't the arrogant man who dismissed my concerns about Jenna. This was someone genuinely terrified of dying alone. "What do you need?" I heard myself ask. "Just your company sometimes. Someone to talk to. Someone who knew me before all of this." Against every rational thought screaming in my head, I nodded. "Okay, I can do that." The relief on his face was profound. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Over the following weeks, I fell into a routine. Coffee with Marcus on Wednesdays before my shift. Dinner on Saturday evenings. He'd share updates about his treatment, and I'd listen, offering what medical insight I could without overstepping. He seemed genuinely remorseful about the affair, about how he'd treated me. He talked about the therapy he'd been doing, the realizations he'd had about his behavior patterns. It was everything I'd wanted to hear during our marriage, but had never received. Diana remained skeptical. "He's love-bombing you," she warned. "This is classic manipulation." "He's dying," I countered. "What could he possibly be manipulating me for?" "I don't know," Diana admitted, "but something feels off." I dismissed her concerns. Diana had never liked Marcus, even before the affair. She was just being protective. By November, Marcus had asked if he could move into my guest room temporarily. His apartment lease was ending, and with his declining health, he was struggling to manage on his own. Just until I can figure out something more permanent, he'd said. Maybe a hospice facility or assisted living. I should have said no, but he looked so frail, so vulnerable. How could I turn away someone who was dying? Diana nearly exploded when I told her. Patricia, this is insane. He cheated on you, divorced you, and now you're taking him in. It's temporary, I insisted, and it's the right thing to do. The right thing to do is let him face the consequences of his choices. Diana shot back. You're not responsible for him anymore. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was. 17 years of marriage didn't just evaporate. And despite everything, some part of me still cared about the man I'd once loved. Marcus moved in on a gray December morning. He didn't have much. Most of his belongings had been sold to pay medical bills, he explained. I'd cleared out the guest room, bought new sheets, made sure he'd be comfortable. You're an angel, he said, tears in his eyes as he looked around the small room. I don't deserve your kindness. Nobody deserves to go through this alone, I replied. That night, I lay in my own bed, listening to him cough in the next room, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. The first month of Marcus living in my apartment settled into an unexpected routine. I'd wake early for my shifts at the hospital, leaving medication reminders and easy breakfast options for him. He'd spend his days resting, supposedly attending treatment appointments, and organizing his affairs. On my days off, I'd drive him to what he said were doctor appointments at the medical center downtown. He always insisted on going in alone. You work with sick people all day, he'd say. You don't need to spend your free time in more hospitals. It seemed considerate, thoughtful even. I'd wait in the parking garage, reading or catching up on emails, until he emerged an hour later, looking exhausted. We'd stop for soup on the way home, and he'd tell me vague details about treatment options and blood counts. I noticed he never brought home paperwork. No prescription bottles accumulated on his nightstand. No appointment cards on the refrigerator. When I mentioned this casually, he had explanations ready. Everything's digital now, he'd say. Or, the pharmacy delivers directly. Didn't I tell you? Small inconsistencies that I rationalized away. He was sick, stressed. Of course, details slipped through the cracks. By January, Marcus had settled into my apartment as if he'd never left. His clothes hung in the guest room closet. His toiletries lined the bathroom shelf. He'd even started cooking dinner on nights when I worked late, something he'd rarely done during our marriage. You're spoiling me, I said one evening, coming home to the smell of his famous lasagna. You're giving me a place to die with dignity, he replied. It's the least I can do. Diana visited less frequently. The tension between her disapproval and my choices had created a wedge in our friendship. When she did come by, she'd watch Marcus with narrowed eyes, as if trying to catch him in a lie. One Saturday afternoon in late January, I ran into my colleague, Dr. Sarah Chen, at the grocery store. Sarah was an oncologist at St. Mary's, someone I'd worked with for years on pediatric cases. Patricia, she said warmly. Then her smile faltered. I heard about Marcus. I'm so sorry. Thank you, I replied. It's been difficult. How's he responding to treatment? She asked. Which protocol did they put him on? I realized with uncomfortable clarity that I didn't know. He's trying an experimental approach, I said vaguely. Through a trial downtown. Sarah's expression shifted subtly. Oh? Which center? I have a friend in clinical trials. Maybe I know the study. I don't remember the name, I admitted. He handles most of the medical details. I'm just providing support at home. She nodded, but something in her eyes suggested concern. Of course. Well, if you ever want me to look at his chart or provide a second opinion, just let me know. Professional courtesy. I thanked her and hurried through my shopping. But her questions lingered. Why didn't I know more about Marcus's treatment? Why had I, a medical professional, accepted such vague information? That evening, as Marcus dozed in his room, I found myself looking through the papers he'd left on the coffee table. Bills, mostly. Credit card statements, nothing medical. I opened his laptop, which he'd left on the dining table. No password. The browser history showed news sites, Facebook, YouTube videos. I scrolled further back. Sports scores, real estate listings, email. My hands hesitated over the keyboard. This was a violation of privacy. But something Sarah had said nagged at me. That look of concern. I opened his email. The inbox was mundane. Spam, mostly. But then I saw a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were emails from his health insurance company. I clicked on the most recent one. The claim summary showed routine office visits, a physical exam, blood work, nothing about cancer treatment, nothing about oncology appointments. My pulse quickened. Maybe he had a different insurance. Maybe these were old records. I checked the dates. They were current. From last week. I dug deeper, checking sent emails, finding messages to his brother dated just days ago that said nothing about illness, messages to friends making plans for spring, plans for someone who expected to be alive. Then I found the drafts folder. Inside was an unsent email to Jenna. My darling Jenna, it began. I know you said you needed space, but I'm doing everything you asked. I've been securing our future, just like we discussed. Patricia has been incredibly naive about everything. By March, I should have enough to make our fresh start. Trust me, this is going to work. The email was dated 2 weeks ago. I stared at the screen, my medical training automatically noting my physical symptoms. Elevated heart rate, difficulty breathing, tunnel vision. This was shock. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Diana. Patricia, she said without preamble. I did something. I'm sorry, but I had to. What did you do? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. I hired a private investigator to follow Marcus. I know you're angry, but Patricia, he's not sick. He was at the gym yesterday. The gym. Lifting weights. I have photos. My eyes were still fixed on the unsent email. I know, I whispered. What? I know. I just found emails. Diana, he's been lying about everything. The cancer, the treatment, all of it. Oh my God. Diana's voice shifted from defensive to protective. Where are you? Are you safe? Is he there? He's sleeping, I said. Or pretending to sleep. Get out of there, Diana urged. Come to my place. We'll figure this out. No. I closed the laptop carefully, my nurse training taking over. Years of maintaining composure in crisis situations. No. I have a better idea. Patricia, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Marcus has been playing a very elaborate game, I replied, my voice growing steadier with each word. And it's time I changed the rules. After hanging up with Diana, I sat in my living room as darkness fell outside. My mind raced through the past 4 months. Every symptom Marcus had displayed, every appointment he'd supposedly attended, every medication he'd claimed to take. It had all been performance. An elaborate con targeting the one person he knew would be too compassionate, too guilty, too medical to turn away someone dying. But why? What was the end game? I opened his laptop again, digging deeper into his files. Then I found a folder labeled New Properties. Inside were listings for beach houses in Costa Rica, expensive ones, far beyond what Marcus could afford alone. Then I found the real estate agent's email. "Thank you for the deposit, Mr. Torres. The property will be ready for occupancy in March. I look forward to meeting both you and Ms. Chen at closing. Torres, not Monroe, and Ms. Chen, not Mrs. Monroe." He was planning to leave the country with Jenna, using a new identity. I kept searching. Bank statements showed he'd been slowly draining his accounts, converting everything to cash. There were emails to a document forger about new passports, messages about closing his business permanently. The pieces assembled into a clear picture. Marcus needed somewhere to stay while he liquidated his life. He needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions while he sold off assets and prepared to disappear. And who better than his ex-wife, the compassionate nurse who'd always taken care of him? The fake cancer diagnosis ensured I'd take him in without resistance. The vague medical details meant I wouldn't verify anything with real doctors. The timeline, 6 months, gave him enough time to organize everything before vanishing. And I'd played my role perfectly. The forgiving ex-wife, the caretaker, the fool. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Are you okay? Should I come over?" "I'm fine," I replied. "Tomorrow morning, can you come by around 9 and bring your investigator friend?" The response came immediately. "Of course. What's the plan?" "I'm going to do what I do best," I texted back. "Provide excellent patient care." The next morning, I woke early and prepared breakfast as usual. Oatmeal with fresh fruit, orange juice, coffee. I arranged everything on a tray and knocked gently on Marcus's door. "Good morning," I said brightly. "How are you feeling today?" He sat up slowly, maintaining his performance. "Tired," he said. "The pain's been worse lately." "I'm so sorry." I set the tray across his lap. "I made your favorite. You're too good to me, Patricia." I smiled. "Actually, I was thinking. I ran into Dr. Chen yesterday, my colleague from the hospital. She's an oncologist. I mentioned your case, and she offered to provide a second opinion. Pro bono. Professional courtesy." Marcus's face flickered with something, alarm, then smoothed into grateful appreciation. "That's kind, but I'm comfortable with my current team." "I'm sure you are, but humor me. I worry that you're not getting the most aggressive treatment. Dr. Chen specializes in pancreatic cancer. She might know about clinical trials your doctors haven't mentioned." "Really, Patricia, I don't want to burden anyone else." "It's no burden," I interrupted gently. "In fact, I already told her you'd come by the hospital tomorrow, just for a consultation. It would make me feel so much better." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "If it means that much to you." "It does." I patted his hand. "Now eat your breakfast before it gets cold." At 9 a.m., Diana arrived with a man she introduced as Robert Chen, the private investigator. We sat in my bedroom with the door closed while Marcus remained in the guest room. Robert showed me surveillance photos from the past week. Marcus at a coffee shop, looking healthy and energetic. Marcus at a gym, lifting weights. Marcus meeting with Jenna at a restaurant, both of them laughing. "There's more," Robert said. I checked his financials. He's been liquidating everything. Closing accounts, selling investments. He's preparing to run. I showed them the emails I'd found. Diana's face darkened with anger. "That bastard," she hissed. "Patricia, we need to call the police. This is fraud." "Not yet," I said calmly. "I want him to think his plan is working. Let him feel safe, confident. The appointment tomorrow with Dr. Chen will force his hand." "What happens at the appointment?" Robert asked. "Marcus will have to either admit he's not sick, or he'll have to undergo an actual medical examination. Either way, his lie collapses." Diana gripped my hand. "I'm sorry I doubted you. I should have trusted that you'd see through him eventually." "You tried to warn me," I replied. "I just needed to figure it out myself." The rest of that day passed in careful performance. I maintained my role as devoted caretaker, while Marcus maintained his role as dying man. But now I saw the cracks. The way he stood up too quickly when he thought I wasn't looking. The absence of actual symptoms. The performance of coughing that was clearly forced. That evening, Marcus's phone rang while he was in the shower. I glanced at the screen. "Jenna." I answered it. Silence on the other end. Then, "Who is this?" "This is Patricia," I said pleasantly. "Marcus's ex-wife. He's in the shower right now, but I can take a message." More silence. I'm a friend from his therapy group." "Oh, how nice." I kept my tone warm. "He's mentioned how helpful therapy has been, especially with processing his terminal diagnosis." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "His what?" "The pancreatic cancer," I continued. "Stage 4. Hasn't he told you? He has about 2 months left, according to the doctors." Jenna hung up. I smiled, setting the phone back down. Marcus emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later. "Your phone rang," I said. "Someone from your therapy group?" "She said she'd call back." His face went pale. "What? What did she say?" "Just that she'd try again later." I turned back to my book. "Are you feeling well enough for that doctor's appointment tomorrow? We can reschedule if you're too tired." "No," he said quickly. "No. I'll be fine." That night, I heard him on the phone in his room. His voice, urgent, but muffled. I pressed my ear against the wall. "She knows something's wrong," he was saying. "No, I don't know how. Patricia must have said something. We need to move up the timeline. Can you be ready by next week?" A pause. "I know it's sooner than planned, but we don't have a choice. Just trust me. Everything's still under control." But I could hear the panic in his voice. Everything was not under control anymore. The next morning, I drove Marcus to St. Mary's Hospital. He was quiet during the drive, his usual chatty nervousness replaced by tense silence. Dr. Sarah Chen met us in her office, professional and warm. "Marcus, thank you for coming in. Patricia speaks very highly of your courage through all this." He managed a weak smile. "She's been my rock." Sarah opened a file. "So, let's start with the basics. Can you tell me when you were diagnosed and which oncology practice you've been working with?" Marcus named a clinic across town, his answers coming slowly. "And your oncologist's name?" Sarah asked, pen poised. "Dr. Stevens," he said. Sarah's eyebrow raised slightly. "Michael Stevens? Yes. Interesting." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Dr. Stevens retired 8 months ago. He moved to Arizona." Marcus's face froze. I must be confused about the name. The treatments have made my memory foggy." "Of course." Sarah's voice remained professional, but her eyes were sharp. "Well, why don't we do a physical exam? I'd like to palpate your abdomen, check for the tumor markers that would be evident with stage 4 pancreatic cancer." "That's really not necessary." Marcus started to stand. "I should go. I'm feeling unwell." "I think it is necessary. I said quietly. My first words since arriving. In fact, Marcus, I think you should tell Dr. Chen the truth. He turned to me, and for a moment, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Patricia, what? Tell her about the gym membership, I continued. About the Costa Rica property. About the new passport under the name Torres. The color drained completely from his face. You went through my things. You're not dying, I said, my voice steady, despite the anger burning in my chest. You never had cancer. This was all an elaborate con to use me while you prepared to run away with Jenna. Sarah stood up, her expression hardening. Mr. Monroe, I'm going to have to ask you to stay right there. Patricia, you need to call hospital security. Marcus lunged for the door, but Sarah was faster. She pressed the emergency call button on her desk. Within seconds, 2 security guards entered the hallway. This is insane, Marcus shouted. Patricia, you're being paranoid. The stress of my illness has made you irrational. There is no illness, I said calmly, and I have proof. Emails to Jenna discussing the plan. Surveillance photos of you at the gym. Financial records showing you liquidating assets. It's over, Marcus. The security guards moved to either side of him. Sarah picked up her phone. I'm calling the police. This is fraud. Impossibly attempted theft. Marcus's face contorted with rage. You can't do this to me. After everything I went through with you, you owe me. I owe you. My voice rose for the first time. I spent 4 months caring for you, believing you were dying. I took you into my home, my life, again, and you were using me as a convenient place to hide while you destroyed the evidence of your existence. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I showed them everything, the emails, the financial records, the surveillance photos. Robert, Diana's investigator, arrived with additional documentation. Marcus tried several different stories. He was sick, just not with cancer. He'd been confused about his diagnosis. The Jenna emails were taken out of context, but each lie crumbled as we presented evidence. Detective Rodriguez looked at me with sympathy. Ms. Monroe, you did the right thing. This is clear fraud. We'll need your statement, but Mr. Monroe is going to be arrested today. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he turned to me one last time. I did love you once, he said. That was real. I met his eyes without flinching. Maybe, but everything since has been a lie. And I'm done being your safety net. After he was gone, Sarah put her arm around my shoulders. Patricia, you were incredibly brave. I don't feel brave, I admitted. I feel like an idiot for believing him in the first place. You're a compassionate person who believed someone you once loved was dying. That doesn't make you an idiot. It makes you human. Diana and Robert met me in the hospital parking lot. Diana pulled me into a fierce hug. It's over, she said. You're free of him for real this time. We drove to Diana's house, where she'd already prepared the guest room. You're staying here tonight, she insisted. No arguments. I didn't have the energy to argue anyway. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me exhausted. That evening, curled up on Diana's couch with tea and her cat purring in my lap, I finally let myself feel everything. Anger at Marcus for the manipulation, embarrassment at being fooled, but underneath it all, relief. Your phone's blowing up, Diana said, glancing at the device I'd left on the coffee table. I picked it up. Dozens of messages, some from colleagues at the hospital who'd heard what happened, a few from former mutual friends of Marcus and me, and one from an unknown number. I opened that one. It was from Jenna. I didn't know about the cancer lie. He told me you two were separated because you were controlling and abusive. I thought I was helping him escape a bad situation. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whether Jenna had known the full truth or not wasn't my problem anymore. Diana peered over my shoulder. Was that her? Yeah. I set the phone down. She claims she didn't know. Do you believe her? I thought about it. Honestly, I don't care. She's welcome to him when he gets out of jail. If he gets out, Diana corrected. Robert says with the fraud charges and the evidence of planned identity theft, he's looking at serious time. The next few weeks passed in a blur of police statements, meetings with prosecutors, and the slow process of reclaiming my life. Marcus had managed to access one of my credit cards while living with me, racking up over $15,000 in charges, furniture shipments to a storage unit, flights booked to Costa Rica, cash advances. My lawyer assured me I'd be able to recover the money as part of the criminal case, but it would take time. The story hit local news. Nurse exposes ex-husband's fake cancer diagnosis. The hospital fielded media calls, but Sarah ran interference, making sure my privacy was protected. Some people were sympathetic. Others questioned why I'd been foolish enough to fall for it. I tried not to read the comments online, but occasionally one would slip through. How did she not know he wasn't really sick? She's a nurse, for God's sake. Those hurt the most because they echoed my own self-criticism. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Marcus's arrest, I was having lunch in the hospital cafeteria when an elderly woman approached my table. "Excuse me, are you Patricia Monroe?" I tensed, preparing for criticism. "Yes." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to thank you. My daughter's ex-husband has been doing something similar, using sympathy to manipulate her and access her finances. Your story gave her the courage to investigate. She found out last week he'd been lying about having PTSD. Your bravery helped save her." I stood up and hugged the stranger, both of us crying in the middle of the cafeteria. Maybe some good would come from this nightmare after all. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for mid-March. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, met with me beforehand. "He's going to plead guilty," she said. "His lawyer knows the evidence is overwhelming. We're looking at 2 to 5 years, plus restitution." Only 2 to 5 years? I tried to keep the disappointment out of my voice. For what he did, it's substantial. Plus, he'll have a fraud conviction on his record. That follows you forever. On the day of the plea hearing, I sat in the courtroom with Deanna on one side and Sarah on the other. Marcus entered in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The judge asked him to enter his plea. "Guilty, Your Honor," he said quietly. The judge looked directly at me. "Ms. Monroe, would you like to make a victim impact statement?" I hadn't prepared one, but I stood up anyway. "Your Honor," I began, my voice shaking slightly. "For 4 months, I believed the man I once loved was dying. I opened my home to him. I cared for him. I forgave him for the affair that ended our marriage because I thought he was facing death alone." I paused, making sure Marcus was looking at me. Every symptom was fake. Every doctor's appointment was a lie. Every moment of fear and grief I felt was manipulated for his benefit. He didn't just steal money from me. He stole my compassion, my trust, my ability to believe in basic human decency. Marcus looked down at his hands. But here's what he didn't steal, I continued. My strength, my resilience, my capacity to help others. I'm still a nurse. I still believe in caring for people. He didn't break that in me. I sat back down, Diana squeezing my hand. The judge nodded. Mr. Monroe, you exploited the compassion of someone who loved you. You weaponized fake illness to manipulate and deceive. This court sentences you to 4 years in state prison, plus full restitution of all financial damages, including legal fees and credit restoration costs. The gavel came down. As they led Marcus away, he glanced back at me one more time. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see that I was still standing. 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, I sat in the same cafe where he'd first told me his lie. Diana was with me, celebrating my acceptance into a master's program for nursing education. You're really doing this? Diana asked, beaming. Going back to school? I am. I wanted to do something meaningful with what happened. Maybe teach future nurses how to recognize manipulation, even from people they care about. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a women's advocacy group, asking if I'd be willing to speak at their annual conference about recognizing financial fraud in relationships. What do you think? I showed Diana the email. Too soon? She shook her head. I think you've turned something horrible into something that helps people. That's not too soon. That's exactly right. I accepted the speaking invitation, then ordered another coffee. As I waited, I looked around the cafe. The world kept moving. People laughing, arguing, falling in love, breaking up. Life continuing in its messy, complicated way. Marcus had tried to make me a victim of his elaborate con, and for a while, I had been. But victim wasn't my identity. It was just something that had happened to me. The barista called my name, and I stood up to grab my coffee. As I walked back to the table, I caught my reflection in the cafe window. I looked different than I had 6 months ago. Older, maybe, but also stronger, more certain. Diana raised her cup in a toast. To new beginnings. I clinked my paper cup against hers. To knowing your worth, I corrected, and never letting anyone convince you otherwise. 1 year after Marcus's arrest, I received an unexpected letter forwarded from my lawyer. It was from Marcus, postmarked from the correctional facility where he was serving his sentence. I debated throwing it away, unopened, but curiosity won out. Patricia, the letter began, I don't expect forgiveness, and I have no right to contact you. But my therapist here suggested I write this as part of my rehabilitation. Not to make excuses, but to take real accountability. The letter continued for 3 pages. Marcus explained how the con had started small, just planning to stay with me for a few weeks while he sorted out his finances. But then he'd realized how easy it was to maintain the lie, how my compassion made me the perfect mark. He wrote about his relationship with Jenna, how it had been built on similarly toxic foundations. She'd wanted the version of himself he pretended to be, not who he really was. When she discovered the truth about the fake cancer, she'd cut all contact. I lost everything, he wrote. My freedom, my reputation, my relationship, the business I'd spent years building. And I deserved to lose it all. What I did to you was unconscionable. The letter ended with, I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that you did nothing wrong. Your compassion wasn't a weakness I exploited. It was a strength I could never possess. I hope you found happiness. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a folder with all the other documentation from the case. Then, I sent a brief reply through my lawyer. "Marcus," I wrote, "I appreciate your accountability. I hope you use your time in prison to become someone better. But I need you to know that my healing doesn't depend on your redemption. I've already moved forward. I'm writing this not for you, but to close this chapter for myself. I wish you well, but from a distance. Patricia." I never heard from him again. 2 years after the arrest, I stood in front of a room full of nursing students at Portland State University, where I now taught part-time while finishing my master's degree. Today, we're going to talk about compassion fatigue and boundary setting, I began. But first, I want to tell you a story about the time I was conned by someone faking terminal cancer. The students leaned forward, captivated. I'd learned that my story resonated most when I told it plainly, without dramatizing or downplaying what had happened. Over the next hour, I walked them through the entire experience. The initial meeting at the cafe, the gradual erosion of my boundaries, the red flags I'd dismissed, the moment of discovery, and finally, the confrontation and aftermath. One student raised her hand. "Professor Monroe, how did you not see it sooner? You're a medical professional." I smiled, recognizing the same self-criticism I'd carried for months. That's exactly the question I asked myself every day for a year. The answer is complicated. Yes, I'm a medical professional, but I'm also human, and humans have blind spots, especially when it comes to people we once loved. Another student spoke up. "Do you regret helping him at first? Like, if you could go back, would you refuse to meet him that first time?" I considered this carefully. No, I wouldn't change my initial compassion. What I would change is how quickly I dismissed my own instincts when things didn't add up. I had questions. I had doubts, but I suppressed them because I felt guilty for doubting someone who was supposedly dying. The room was silent as the students absorbed this. The lesson here isn't to become cynical or to stop caring for people, I continued. It's to trust yourself. Your instincts are data. When something feels off, investigate. Compassion and skepticism can coexist. After class, several students approached me privately. 2 shared their own stories of being manipulated by partners or family members. 1 asked for resources about recognizing financial abuse. This was why I taught now, not for revenge against Marcus, but to help others recognize the patterns before they lost years of their lives. That evening, Diana and I met for our weekly dinner. She'd recently gotten engaged to a kind, stable man named Thomas, who treated her like she hung the moon. "Have you thought about dating again?" Diana asked, as we shared a bottle of wine. I shrugged. "Maybe eventually. I'm not opposed to it. I'm rebuilding my ability to trust. That takes time." "You know what, though?" Diana said. "You're different now. Stronger, more confident. When you do date again, you won't put up with half the things you tolerated with Marcus." She was right. The experience had changed me fundamentally. I'd learned to value my own judgment, to maintain boundaries, to recognize that someone else's crisis didn't obligate me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Chen. "Drinks tomorrow. I have news." The next evening, Sarah and I met at a wine bar near the hospital. She was practically bouncing with excitement. "Okay, what's the news?" I asked. "Remember how you spoke at that advocacy conference last month?" Sarah began. I nodded. I'd given a talk about recognizing fraud in intimate relationships. focusing on the emotional manipulation tactics that made victims doubt their own perceptions. Well, someone filmed it and it went viral. Over 2 million views in 3 weeks. I nearly dropped my wine glass. What? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me. The video had been shared across multiple platforms. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. One comment read, "This happened to my mom with her boyfriend. Thank you for talking about this." Another said, "I'm a nurse too, and I felt so stupid for falling for something similar. Hearing your story helped me forgive myself." "There's more," Sarah said. "You've been contacted by a publisher. They want you to write a book." "A book?" I felt overwhelmed. "Sarah, I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of exposure. Just think about it. Your story helps people. Patricia, more people need to hear it." Over the following weeks, I did think about it. I talked to Diana, to my therapist, to the women's advocacy group I'd been volunteering with. Everyone encouraged me to consider it. Finally, I met with the publisher's representative, a woman named Angela, who specialized in memoirs of survival and resilience. "We're not interested in a revenge story," Angela explained. "We want something that helps readers understand the psychology of manipulation, how intelligent, capable people can be deceived, and most importantly, how they can rebuild afterward. That I could write." I signed the contract 3 months later. Writing the book was harder than I expected. I had to relive every moment of the deception, every choice I'd made, every warning sign I'd ignored. My therapist helped me process the emotions that surfaced. But something unexpected happened as I wrote. I began to see the experience not as a shameful failure, but as a profound lesson in human nature, about how trauma and guilt can make us vulnerable, about how predators identify and exploit those vulnerabilities. The book took 18 months to complete. During that time, I finished my master's degree, continued teaching, and slowly began dating again. His name was David, a quiet architect I'd met through a friend. He was divorced, had 2 teenage daughters, and approached relationships with the same caution I did. We took things slowly: coffee dates, walks in the park, conversations about our past relationships, and what we'd learned. He never rushed me, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. And critically, when I told him my story, he didn't try to rescue me or fix me. He just listened. "You're one of the strongest people I've known," he said simply, "and I'd like to keep getting to know you, if you'll let me." 6 months into dating David, my book was published. Prescription for Deception: How I Survived My Ex-Husband's Fake Cancer Diagnosis and Reclaimed My Life. The launch event was held at a local bookstore. Over 100 people showed up. Some were survivors of similar scams. Others were mental health professionals. Many were simply people who wanted to understand how manipulation worked. I read an excerpt from the final chapter, the one about rebuilding trust in yourself and others. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me with tears in her eyes. "My daughter is going through something similar right now," she said. "Her boyfriend claims to have a traumatic brain injury, but nothing adds up. I bought 5 copies of your book, 1 for her and 4 for the rest of the family. We're staging an intervention next week." I hugged her tightly. "Trust your instincts," I said, "and make sure she knows that whatever happens, you're there for her." The book sold steadily, eventually hitting regional bestseller lists. I was invited to speak at conferences, appear on podcasts, and write articles about financial fraud and emotional manipulation. Marcus's name was changed in the book to protect both our privacy, but those who knew the real story recognized it immediately. I received a few messages from mutual acquaintances. Some were supportive, others were critical, suggesting I was profiting from his mistakes. I didn't respond to the criticism. I knew my motivations. This wasn't about Marcus. It was about the thousands of people who'd messaged me, saying, "I thought I was the only one. Thank you for making me feel less alone." 3 years after Marcus's arrest, I received notification that he was being released on parole. My lawyer contacted me to ensure I understood the terms of his release, including a restraining order that prohibited him from contacting me. "How do you feel about him being out?" Diana asked when I told her. I was surprised by my own answer. Indifferent. He's not my problem anymore. And that was true. Marcus had become a character in a story I told to help others. The real man, with his lies and manipulations, no longer had power over me. David and I had moved in together by then, a careful decision we'd made after 2 years of dating. His daughters had embraced me, especially after I'd helped the younger one prepare for nursing school entrance exams. One Sunday morning, as David and I were having coffee on our balcony, I received an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Christine. "Dear Patricia," it began, "you don't know me, but I'm Marcus's younger sister. I've read your book and wanted to reach out. First, to apologize for my brother's actions. Our family had no idea what he was doing to you. Second, to thank you for exposing him. After his arrest, we learned he'd been running similar scams on other people for years. You were the first person brave enough to fight back. Because of you, 3 other victims came forward." Marcus received additional charges and is now in therapy that he desperately needed. I don't expect you to forgive him or our family for not seeing who he really was. I just wanted you to know that your courage had ripples you might not be aware of. I showed the email to David. "What are you going to do?" "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to thank her for reaching out. And then I'm going to continue living my life." I responded briefly to Christine, expressing appreciation for her message, but maintaining boundaries. I didn't need closure from Marcus's family. I'd already found it within myself. 5 years after the arrest, I was invited to speak at a national nursing conference in Seattle. The topic was professional boundaries and personal vulnerability, lessons from the front lines. Standing in front of 800 healthcare professionals, I felt a surge of purpose. This was what I was meant to do. Not just treat patients, but teach future caregivers how to protect themselves while maintaining their compassion. I began with a question. How many of you have been manipulated or taken advantage of by someone you cared for? Nearly every hand in the room went up. We work in a profession that requires empathy, I continued, but empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Today, I'm going to share my story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a roadmap for how we rebuild when our compassion is exploited. The standing ovation at the end brought tears to my eyes. Afterward, dozens of attendees lined up to share their own stories. A male nurse who'd been financially drained by an addicted sibling. A doctor whose ex-partner had faked a disability to avoid work. A social worker who'd been gaslit by a client into believing professional boundaries were cruel. Each story reinforced what I'd learned. Manipulation thrives in silence and shame. Speaking openly about these experiences was an act of resistance. That evening, David surprised me with a reservation at a waterfront restaurant. Over dinner, he pulled out a small box. "I'm not great at speeches," he said, his voice nervous, "but I know that you've been through hell and came out stronger. I know you value honesty and trust above everything. So I'm going to be completely honest. I love you, Patricia. I love your strength, your compassion, your refusal to let one bad man define your capacity for love. Will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, then at David's hopeful face. This was nothing like my first marriage. David didn't need me to save him or fix him. He was whole on his own and wanted to build something together. "Yes," I said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, absolutely, yes." We married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Waterfront Park, the same place where Marcus had once manipulated my compassion. But now the location held new meaning. It was where I reclaimed my narrative. Diana was my maid of honor. Sarah officiated. David's daughter stood up with us, and my nursing students filled the audience alongside friends and family. In my vows, I promised David honesty, partnership, and the courage to be vulnerable again. He promised me patience, respect, and a love that wouldn't require me to diminish myself. As we exchanged rings, I thought briefly about Marcus. Somewhere, he was rebuilding his life after prison. I hoped he was genuinely working on becoming a better person. But more importantly, I hoped he understood that he hadn't broken me. He'd tried to use my compassion as a weapon against me. Instead, I'd transformed that experience into a shield for others. 7 years after the fake cancer diagnosis, I published my second book, Boundaries Without Guilt, a healthcare professional's guide to self-preservation. It became required reading in several nursing programs across the country. I'd also started a nonprofit organization called Compassion with Clarity, which provided resources for people experiencing manipulation in intimate relationships. We offered free legal consultations, therapy referrals, and support groups. The organization had helped over 3,000 people in its first 2 years. Each success story felt like a small victory against the shame and silence that manipulation depended on. One afternoon, while leading a support group, a woman raised her hand. She was in her 40s, recently divorced, and struggling with guilt about leaving her husband. "He keeps telling me I'm abandoning him when he needs me most," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He says he can't survive without me." I recognized that manipulation immediately. "What does your gut tell you?" I asked gently. "That he's lying, that he's perfectly capable of surviving. He just doesn't want to do the work." "Then trust that instinct," I said. "You're not responsible for another adult's emotional regulation. You're not abandoning him by refusing to set yourself on fire to keep him warm." The relief on her face was profound. Sometimes people just needed permission to trust themselves. David and I had settled into a comfortable life. He'd supported my work unconditionally, even when it meant irregular hours or emotional exhaustion after difficult support group sessions. In return, I'd helped him reconnect with his daughters after years of strained relationships following his divorce. We talked openly about our past relationships, about the mistakes we'd made, and the lessons we'd learned. There were no secrets between us, no hidden agendas, just two imperfect people choosing each other daily. 10 years after Marcus's arrest, I received an unexpected message through my organization's website. It was from Jenna, Dr. Monroe, it began, using my academic title. I know I have no right to contact you, and I'll understand if you don't respond. I've followed your work over the years. Your books helped me recognize that I was also a victim of Marcus's manipulation, though in a different way. I'm now a therapist specializing in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. I wanted to thank you for the work you're doing. You've probably saved hundreds of people from what we went through. I'm sorry for my part in hurting you, even if I didn't fully understand what was happening at the time. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Jenna had been complicit in Marcus's betrayal, even if she claimed ignorance about the fake cancer. But another part of me recognized genuine remorse and growth. I responded briefly. Jenna, thank you for reaching out. I hope you found healing in your own journey. If your work as a therapist helps even one person recognize manipulation sooner than I did, then perhaps some good came from all of this. I never heard from her again, but I hoped she continued doing meaningful work. 15 years after the fake cancer diagnosis, I retired from active nursing to focus full-time on my nonprofit and writing. My third book, The Compassion Trap: Why Good People Fall for Bad Lies, had just been released. David and I had moved to a small house outside Portland with a garden and a view of Mount Hood. We spent our mornings having coffee on the porch, our afternoons working on our respective projects, and our evenings cooking dinner together. One day, while organizing old files, I came across the original letter Marcus had sent from prison, the one where he'd apologized and taken accountability. I reread it with the perspective of 15 years. Had he been genuine? Possibly. People could change. But whether or not he had changed was irrelevant to my healing. I'd learned that forgiveness wasn't about absolving someone else. It was about releasing the hold their actions had on your life. I'd released Marcus years ago, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I placed the letter back in the file and closed the drawer. Some chapters of our lives needed to be preserved as lessons, not reopened as wounds. That evening, Diana called with news. She and Thomas were expecting their first child, a late-in-life blessing they'd stopped hoping for. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if I mess this up? You won't, I assured her. You're one of the strongest, most loving people I know, and you've spent years supporting others through their hardest moments. You're more than ready for this. Will you be the godmother? I'd be honored. As I hung up, David appeared with 2 glasses of wine. Good news? The best news, I said, filling him in on Diana's pregnancy. We're getting old, David teased. Godparents to a newborn at our age. I laughed. Speak for yourself. I'm still in my prime. That night, lying in bed with David's arm around me, and the sound of crickets outside our window, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Marcus had tried to destroy me with his lies. Instead, he'd inadvertently set me on a path toward my true purpose, helping others recognize manipulation, teaching healthcare workers to maintain boundaries, creating resources for survivors. His deception had been meant to diminish me, but I'd transformed it into something that empowered thousands of people. That, I realized, was the ultimate victory. Not revenge, not even justice, though both had played their roles. The real triumph was that I'd taken the worst betrayal of my life and used it to build something meaningful. Marcus was just a footnote in my story now, a difficult chapter that taught me important lessons, But he wasn't the author of my narrative anymore. I was, and as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for Diana's unwavering friendship, for Sarah's professional support, for David's patient love, for the students and readers and support group members who'd shown me that vulnerability and strength could coexist. Marcus had given me a prescription for deception. I'd turned it into a prescription for healing, and that made all the difference.